Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and welcome to the show, y'all. You know, every year in the United States, really, like millions of people go off for parole every year. And I think it's something like, I don't know, I read somewhere where like almost like 600,000 people every year are released on parole. Every year. Now, at the end of, 1 year, I think a third of them will come back. And then after 3 years, it's more than that. Something like that, right? But, you know, what always intrigued me is like the people that go off for parole and they don't make it. You know, because I know some people in here that, listen, in here are like the model inmates. The model inmates, they don't get write-ups. They don't do anything. And it's hard for me sometimes to understand why they don't make parole. You never know. They can do all of the things they're supposed to do, have all the certificates, taking college courses, doing all of these different types of things, right? And they go into that parole board and have a boatload of recommendations and still get denied. Still get denied. There was this one dude named Bob. Now, Bob had been up for parole several times before I met him. Several times before I met him. And every time Bob went up, it was always something. You know, he had protesters, of course, you know, and he had a very, 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 very violent charge, you know, murder, you know. But still, I had seen people with murder charges go up that were nowhere near like Bob and make it. But see, that's what it looked like. See, you never know what's really going on. See, Bob, when I met him, I remember when he went off for parole one day. And Bob had been preparing for this day for 6 months, getting all of his recommendations together, talking to people, and even the wardens and the captains and all of these people, they liked Bob. Bob was a heck of a guy, model inmate. Tell on you at the drop of a dime if he thought it was going to carry him some kind of favor with the administration. He was no threat to anybody in the penitentiary. He had taken all kind of vocational class, took HVAC, building motors, all kinds of stuff, man. The man, wood shop, anything they had, he had taken it. The man was so proficient, he could teach the classes. He could teach them. And the day came that he went up for parole. This is probably about his 7th or 8th time. And his family and everybody came to the parole hearing. And then when you go to a parole hearing, you got the victims on one side of the crime, and then you got the family member of the person that's going up for parole on the other side. They try to keep them separate because you never know what things can turn into when you got people talking about how they were hurt and then the other people talking about he's done enough time. So they try to keep them separate. But most of the time, they remain cordial towards each other. They understand. The victim's family, you know what I'm saying, are upset. And the family members of the person that did it, they understand the pain that they're going through. We're all grown people here. You know what I'm saying? So they give leeway when they get to talking crazy or looking crazy or whatever. These people have been hurt in a way that is almost unimaginable unless you experience something like that. There's no explaining how a person should react to that. You got to give them a pass. You got to give them a pass. And most family members of the individual that caused that pain, they get that. So they at the parole hearing, right? And they get at the parole hearing and all of the victims' family, they come up and they're talking about that Bob should never be let out. They are against it. They are afraid of him for all the different reasons that they give. And then, you know, the parole officers start talking about, asking Bob, why should we let you out? Why should we let you out? And Bob gets to talking about all of the certificates that he's gotten. He gets to talking about all of the college courses that he's taken. He gets to talking about all of the recommendations that he has from everybody almost that works at the penitentiary. He's got people that have retired from the penitentiary coming back to testify in his behalf. And it baffles everybody that these people see Bob as reformed, changed, different. It baffles everybody that is on the outside of the penitentiary. What are you seeing that we don't see? Tell me. What is it? And they try to explain it to him. And the outcome in this situation rested on the grandchildren of Bob's victim. And they got up there and they testified that they would never see their grandfather again. And that's true. That's understandable. The pain that they expressed. All of it's true. And they testified how he didn't have to do what he did, but he chose to do it, and he should not be able to enjoy life and live life in a way that their grandfather was not. It was a very emotional hearing, very emotional. And the parole board didn't take 10 or 15 minutes to decide. They had decided to put Bob off again for a year. And at this point, Bob had, I know it was late 30, maybe 40 something, maybe early 40 in number of years that he had. I know he had over 36, 37. I know it, And he sat there at the table, and they said he didn't even show any emotion. It was as if he had already expected to be denied again. And when the board announced that they had declined him again, the victim's family, they all clapped and cheered and thanked the parole board members and all this and that, right? And went up there and was shaking their hands, and they were looking at Bob and showing their teeth, and he looked back at them and tried to keep his face as calm and mild-mannered as he could. And then the officers came over. They told him to stand up and that he could leave. And they escorted him out, one on the front, one in the back, and two on the sides as they walked him down the hallway, and he left. And then they allowed the victim's family to leave, and then his family were able to leave. And when the victim's family and his family got out into the parking lot, the conversation took place. They were all happy, and then the victim's family, the Bob's family, they were upset. And one of the people said, "Well, what is it going to take? What does he have to do?" And they told him there's nothing that he can do. We're not changing. And they got in their cars and they left. Heavy-hearted. Because they saw that Bob had changed. They believed that Bob had changed. But what we don't know is what the parole board knows. Everybody talks about what happened. But see, those reports that they have reveal a darker story that we don't get to see, that we're not aware of. So when Bob came back on the compound, and everybody's asking, because when we see Bob is walking around, he's very helpful and he's kind and he's helping people and he's doing all these different types of things, and he's volunteering for programs, and the people at the prison, they're appreciating all of the different things that he's doing. And so we're like puzzled, like if Bob can't make parole, we can't. Ain't no way we can make parole. But see, a lot of times when they flash somebody's case on TV, they don't get into all the details, and then the cameras are not up in the courtroom in most situations, right? So you don't know, what's going on. Now today, you see cameras in the courtroom, so everybody is aware of what's going on to some detail. And then, you also got social media, so it's really a lot going on. You got these constant around-the-clock court TV shows and everything, so people know what's going on. But back then, you didn't have all of that. So the only people that really remember Bob's case are the people that were alive then and reported the news then and all of those different types of things. And Bob was so old at this point, it's like, wait a minute. Don't nobody know really what happened. So one day I found myself down on the ball field, me and my number two, and we were talking the ball. And I just, in one of my moves, and I was just curious. I'm a curious kind of guy. And I said, Bob, man, why you think them folks keep putting you off? And without hesitation, he said, Joe T, you know what I'm in here for? I said, yeah, I know you're in for murder, Bob. You know what I'm saying? I said it as calm as I could, right? Because it's like I saw a spark light up in his eyes, Kind of made chills run all over my body, Kind of made chills run all over my body. Hair on my neck stood up, And I'm looking at it, but I can't let him know that I ain't scared of you. You feel what I'm saying? But I'm gonna tell you, something happened, So He said, Joe T, I chopped up my victim. I said, what? You did what? Come again and say what? He said, I chopped up my victim. I said, why? I mean, that was the only thing I could think of to say. Why? Why would you do that? You know what I'm saying? Why? He said, I was trying to hide the body. I said, okay, how were you trying to hide the body? He said, I chopped him up and I fed him to the hogs. I sat there and I looked at him. I said, okay. Now, I had heard people in my family talking about that, because we come from a small town, and I've always heard, you chop somebody up, put them in the hog pen, ain't nobody gonna find them, all this and that. So I'm like, well, okay. Because, see, people be lying in here. They be lying because they want you to be scared of them and all this and that. And I'm thinking at this moment, this is what Bob trying to scare me. You feel what I'm saying? All this and that. Because a lot of people survive off of that, making sure that everybody think that they got some crazy situation going on so you won't mess with them. Yeah? So I'm looking at him like, yeah, okay, that's what's up. Okay, then, yeah. So my number 2, he sees that I'm like struggling to try to figure out what do you say behind something like that. So he said, if you did all that, how did they find the body? How did they find the body? He said, they didn't find the body. I said, so they ain't got nobody, no nothing. He said, nah, they ain't got nobody, no nothing. I said, man, in my mind, I'm like, this dude here lying. How they gonna find you guilty and they ain't got no body? I know they get cases like that, from time to time, and circumstantial evidence, something points to, the fact that they are confident in declaring the individual dead, right? Whatever that may be, and I'm looking at Bob, I'm like, man, this dude here lying. He lying. That's all I could keep thinking. He's lying. He's misrepresenting the situation. He want people to be scared of him, maybe because he's old and he he around all these gang members now, and he wants you to think he'll do it to you, A lot of people are like that, y'all, in here. So my number 2 keep talking to him and all this and that, and he tell me, he said, look, they found some skeletal remains, right? They swept my hog pen and all this and that, and they found some skeletal remains, and they were able to match what they found to my victim, right? I said, okay. Now, I didn't get all into the DNA because there wasn't no point. I don't understand that stuff to that extent anyway, so I didn't get all into that, right? So I said, did you know it? Now I'm trying to understand, why would you do somebody like it, right? He said, yeah, I knew him. I said, how did you know him? He said, he was my best friend. I said, what? He was your best friend? He was like, yeah, he was my best friend. I said, what would make you so mad that you would do something like that to your best friend, Bob? And he said, well, I don't know. He said, but I'll tell you what. You keep asking me these questions, I'm going to show you why I did this. He said, you ain't got no business asking me these questions, Joe T. This the penitentiary. Now, I'm sitting here thinking, wait a minute, you could have just stopped. It's what I'm thinking in my head. I ain't saying it now because he got me kind of spooked with the way he shot at me like that, right? So I looked at my number 2. I'm like, are we going to have to whoop this old fool because he ain't got no win? No way, shape, or form. He ain't got no win. But he might, the way he acted, he might just get the gumption to just smack me. And if he smacked me, I'm going to drop him. Simple as that, right? So I'm looking at him. I said, all right, Bob, my bad. No disrespect, man. There ain't no disrespect. I didn't mean nothing. I was just asking you a question and all this and that. And I saw something that I had never seen in Bob right then and there. He got upset. He showed that spark in his face. He got upset by me asking him that, right? Now, he leaves us and he's walking laps around the track. He walking laps. And then he come back around. He come back around again and he just stopped. He said, hey, how y'all doing? As if we had never talked to him. As if we had never said that word to him. Now I'm looking at Joe, you know what I'm saying? I mean, he's looking at me and I'm looking at him and we trying to figure out what's going on. And Barry, my number 2, he said, bro, something wrong with dude. I like, yeah, I see something wrong with it. But how in the world this man don't remember that we just finished talking to him, because he acting like we ain't said a word to him. He acting like he ain't even mad no more that I said what I said, right? So my number two says, watch this when he come back around. I'm going to say something to him about it again. Then he pull up on us again. And Bear said, hey, Bob, what you in here? Why didn't folks keep turning you down for parole? He said, well, I chopped up my victim and did this and that. He started giving the rundown again. And then a few minutes later, he did the same thing like he was upset. I said, oh, Lord, we got a real live lunatic here. I said, I can't believe nothing that he's saying. I don't believe nothing at this point that he's told us. Not one bit of it. Not now bit of what he's saying is making sense to me. None of it. Not nothing. So I said, we through playing with him, man, because this might lead to something. So I go back to the unit. And I'm telling my cellie about it and all that. He ended up cracking up, man. He said, man, y'all don't know? I said, no, I don't know. What am I supposed to know? He said, man, Bob is a serial killer. I said, for me? I said, far as I know, he just got one case. He said, no, he got one case in Tennessee. I said, what? One case in Tennessee? And then my cellie, which was my COS, you know what I'm saying, at the time, he said, yeah, he said, Bob is suspected of having bodies. He said, they didn't get him. He said, but they suspected Bob of getting people in 8 different states. I said, what? He was like, yeah. He said, Bob got to go do time in 8 different states. And I'm looking at him, and then it dawned on me. I said, okay. Now I'm starting to understand these parole people. I'm starting to understand these parole people. Right? But then I got to thinking, how he getting all these recommendations and all this and that from the people that run the penitentiary? I mean, people that are retired coming back in here and writing recommendations for this man, saying that he's rehabilitated, he would not be a problem, and this and that on the street. And then them folks ain't even, they knowing they not gonna give it to him. Why would these people do that and put their name out there vouching for somebody like that? So it's making me doubt what my COS is saying. Making me doubt. He said, Joe T, he said, sometimes you can be smart as you want to be. And then the other time, he said, man, you act like you ain't got the sense God gave a piss at. I said, I ain't really like what he said when he said that, right? But I'm looking at him like, because I am confused, genuinely confused. Because I can't figure out why would they do that? Them folks ain't finna put their name out there for no serial killer. They just not finna do that. And he said, Joe T, come on, man. These folks just trying to keep him calm. I said, huh? Trying to keep him calm? He was like, yeah, they trying to keep the dude calm, man. And then I started thinking about it. This dude is bona fide. So these folks is writing these recommendations, and the parole board, these people going through the motion. And then the victim's family, they already know. But why would his family be saying all these things? Why would he be telling people that his family had these conversations in the parking lot with the victims and all this and that? Why would he be painting these pictures that these folks is really for him, and ain't none of these people for him? Why would he even do that? And I'm thinking about it now. You know, I'm a Virgo. I'm analytical. I gotta figure stuff out. So I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking about it. And I'm like, hold up, I got it. And if you want to know what that is, you're gonna have to tune in to the next episode, right? And don't forget to answer the question of the day. You feel what I'm saying? You might be the winner at the end of the week. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.